The morning light filtered through the tall, arched windows of Whitmore County Courthouse, casting long golden streaks across the polished tile floor. Everything inside the old stone building breathed routine. Clerks shuffled papers, judges prepped their notes, and attorneys checked their watches. But down in the East Wing, something was about to shatter that calm. Officer Elena Brooks, boots clicking steadily beside her canine partner, gave Cyrus a quick glance. The seasoned Belgian Malinois had been unusually tense that morning. His ears twitched at every hallway echo, and his steps, normally measured, were quick, almost impatient. She chalked it up to the echoing acoustics or the scent of old coffee drifting from the break room. But the way he kept glancing toward the west stairwell, that stirred something in her gut. Then it happened. Cyrus froze mid-stride, nose twitching like a radar, locking onto something no one else could sense. He gave a sharp, low growl. Elena barely had time to react before 85 pounds of lean, muscled instinct surged forward. The leash jerked violently in her hand, nearly pulling her off balance. "Cyrus, heel," she barked. He didn't listen. He never disobeyed a command. Not once. Not during fires, riots, or the night they'd pulled a man from a burning trailer. But now, in the calmest place in town, Cyrus was breaking all the rules. Elena dug her boots in. "Cyrus, stop!" she snapped. But it was useless. He was locked, infocused, frantic. The Malinois dragged her past the security checkpoint, dodging startled interns and spilling a box of case files onto the marble. Then he turned sharply toward Courtroom 12B. "Elena?" called a bailiff. "What's going on?" But she didn't answer. She couldn't. Her partner had gone Rogan somehow. She trusted him more than she trusted her own doubt. The double doors to the courtroom loomed ahead. Inside, a civil custody hearing was underway. Elena's breath caught. She tightened her grip, not to stop Cyrus anymore, but to brace herself for whatever he had already decided she needed to see. Inside Courtroom 12B, the air was thick with formality and quiet tension. A judge's gavel rested silently on the bench. Stacks of legal documents lined the desks. The overhead lights hummed faintly, but no one paid attention to the details of the room. All eyes, for the moment, were on the small figure seated alone at the far end of the gallery. Lila Wynne, 9 years old, sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her faded blue dress hung a little too loose, the hem brushing her knees like it belonged to a different girl entirely. Her black hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, a little uneven at the ends. She didn't fidget, she didn't cry, she just watched. Half Vietnamese by birth, Lila carried her silence like armor. Social workers had called her mature for her age, but what they really meant was that she had learned to survive without asking for much. Since her mother's death in a drunk driving accident and her father's incarceration for causing it, Lila had moved through the foster system like a ghost, passed from home to home, never landing long enough to unpack her memories. Today, everything could change, or nothing might. On paper, this was just a custody review. But for Lila, it felt like judgment day not in the eyes of the court, but in the heart of a little girl who had run out of places to belong. Across the room, the McCarthys sat beside their lawyer, whispering, glancing over at her from time to time. They were potential adopters kind people, maybe, but so were the last two couples. Lila didn't hate the world, she just didn't expect anything from it anymore. Then, from behind the courtroom doors, came a sound no one anticipated: heavy claws, skidding across marble, followed by a startled gasp. Something was coming. And for reasons she couldn't explain, Lila turned toward that noise and waited. The doors of Courtroom 12B slammed open with a force that echoed off the oak-paneled walls like thunder. Every head snapped around. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Cyrus charged in, ears up, eyes blazing with singular focus. Officer Elena Brooks stumbled just behind him, trying and failing to regain control of the leash that now trailed loosely from her hand. Her breath was ragged. Her badge caught the light. Judge Robert Nolan, mid-sentence, froze. His reading glasses slipped from his hand and hit the bench with a soft clatter. The court reporter's fingers hovered in midair, suspended between words. Counsel for both parties stood in stunned silence. One of the McCarthys whispered something under his breath, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. But Cyrus didn't notice any of them. He didn't even glance at the startled faces lining the gallery or the uniformed deputies rising from their seats. His paws pounded across the marble as he headed straight for the jury box, and then, suddenly, he stopped. Dead center, seat 3. The courtroom held its collective breath. Cyrus lowered his head slowly, nose twitching with microscopic precision. Then, without hesitation, he dipped down and crawled forward half his body, disappearing beneath the third chair. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came a sound no one expected. A whimper, faint, frightened, human. Elena's heart lurched. She took a step forward as Cyrus backed out gently, his ears lowered, his posture soft, careful. And there, beneath the bench, a small figure stirred. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't imagination. It was a child, dust-covered knees, scraped palms, eyes wide and full of fear. Cyrus nudged her softly with his nose, then lay down beside her as if to say, "You're safe now. I found you." And the courtroom, for the first time all morning, fell completely silent. The girl under the bench was no more than 5. Her name, Camila whispered urgently by the bailiff moments later, matched the missing child alert issued just after sunrise. She had come to the courthouse with her grandmother, a nervous older woman called to testify in a minor theft case. Somewhere between metal detectors and waiting benches, the two had been separated. No one noticed. No one heard Camila's voice grow too small to call for help. So, like any frightened child, she did the only thing her instincts told her. She hid. She crawled beneath the jury box, knees scraped, dress stained with the dust of a floor rarely cleaned that far back. Her tiny body folded in on itself, trembling, eyes fixed on the dark wood inches from her face. For hours, she had remained there, utterly silent. Until Cyrus came. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply lay down beside her, resting his large head near hers like a silent guardian. Camila didn't flinch. She looked into those dark, steady eyes, and something in her body eased, just a little. Elena knelt slowly at the edge of the jury box, holding her breath. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, voice softer than she thought she could speak. "You're not alone now." And for the first time in hours, Camila blinked, then reached out one shaky hand to touch the fur that had found her when no one else had. For a long moment, no one moved. Camila stayed curled beside Cyrus, her tiny fingers tangled in the fur at his neck. Officer Elena hovered close but didn't dare step nearer. The judge sat frozen behind the bench, unsure whether to recess or simply breathe. Even the McCarthys' potential adoptive parents who'd been watching the chaos unfold remained silent. That's when Lila stood up. No one asked her to. No one expected her to. But she rose anyway. Her sneakers barely made a sound on the marble as she walked from her seat in the gallery. Her small hands clutched the worn strap of her backpack. She didn't look to the adults for permission. She didn't need it. When she reached the jury box, Lila knelt slowly beside Camila. Without a word, she unzipped her bag and pulled out a small, well-loved teddy bear, its ears slightly crooked, one eye sewn back on with blue thread. She gently placed it on the floor in front of the younger girl. Camila blinked. Then Lila did something no one in the courtroom expected. She leaned in just slightly, and in soft, careful Spanish, she began to speak. "Yo también solía esconderme." "I used to hide too," she translated quietly. "But I don't think we have to hide anymore. Not if we have someone with us." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be true. Camila's lips parted slightly. A tear slid down her cheek, not the kind born from fear, but from release. And Cyrus, ever still, remained between them, calm, breathing slowly, a living bridge of warmth and safety that neither girl had known they were allowed to trust. Lila reached out and gently took Camila's hand. And in that fragile, perfect moment, two girls, one who had lost everything, and one who had nearly disappeared without a trace, found something neither of them had expected to that day. Each other. Judge Nolan had presided over thousands of hearings in his career custody battles, parental terminations, adoption pleas. He had mastered the art of keeping emotion at bay, of weighing lives on paper and rendering decisions with clean detachment. But this wasn't on paper. As he watched Lila Wynn, the quiet girl who had barely spoken during the entire proceeding, sit beside a child no one else dared approach, something in him cracked. She hadn't looked to the bench for permission. She hadn't waited for an adult to intervene. She simply acted, gently, bravely, with instinct that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with heart. Nolan blinked hard behind his glasses. He cleared his throat once, then again, but the lump stayed lodged in his chest. Across the courtroom, the McCarthys exchanged a glance. Just minutes ago, they had been uncertain. Lila was quiet, emotionally closed off her, so they thought. Hard to connect with, the file had said. Withdrawn. They'd come today to observe, to gather impressions, to decide. Their hearts were open but cautiously so. Now, that caution had evaporated. What they saw wasn't just a foster child trying to survive. They saw a protector, a girl, who moved without being told, who stepped into fear with steady hands and calming words. They saw a comforter who understood pain, not through training, but through living it. And they saw a sister, someone who could love deeply and without conditions, despite never being taught how. The silence that filled the room wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Judge Nolan finally leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "We'll take a recess," he said, though everyone knew the real shift had already occurred. Not in the docket, not in the record, but in the hearts of those watching a courtroom, forever changed by a girl who had learned to heal while she was still hurting. 3 weeks later, the courtroom looked very different. The usual tension that came with legal hearings had been replaced by warmth, quiet, joyful, and honest. There were no opening statements, no cross-examinations, no verdicts hanging in the balance. Today, Courtroom 12B wasn't a place of judgment. It was a place of belonging. Lila Wynn, dressed in a soft cream sweater and jeans too new to feel like hers just yet, sat at the front of the room beside the McCarthyshire soon-to-be family. Her hair was neatly brushed, but a single strand had escaped and hung over one eyebrow. She didn't fix it. She was too focused on the others who had come to witness this moment. Officer Elena Brooks stood off to the side in her dress blues, trying and failing to keep her eyes from misting over. Next to her sat Camila, now back with her grandmother, clutching the same teddy bear Lila had given her that day under the jury box. And stretched across the floor at their feet, as calm as ever, was Cyrus's canine vest, replaced by a simple collar and a red ribbon tied in a bow. When Judge Nolan entered the room, everyone rose, but he quickly gestured for them to sit again. He didn't sit at the bench this time. Instead, he walked down and stood in front of Lila, a manila envelope in one hand, a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've read a lot of files in my life," he said, voice steady, warm, "but none of them ever showed me what I saw in this courtroom 3 weeks ago." He handed Lila the adoption papers, signed, sealed, and now hers. "I used to believe justice came from the law," he added, "but that day I saw it come from a child who simply chose to care." Lila didn't say anything. She just looked at him, then down at the papers in her lap. Her fingers brushed over the McCarthy name. Her name now, too. Camila clapped quietly. Cyrus let out a low, contented sigh. The ceremony was short, but its impact stretched far beyond those walls.